Good morning, boys and girls. Uh, I'm going to do another one of those introductory book sections, but if you're not interested in that, you could just skip ahead. I'll probably only be a minute or two. Today, I'm introducing a book called The Eye of the I. It's in the same, more or less the same series as Power versus Force, also by Dr. Richard R. Hawkins. A great introductory text.
David, not Richard.
Oh, sorry, David Hawkins. I don't know why I said Richard. Oh,
Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, I was thinking the Richard Dawkins or Stephen Hawkins. Richard Dawkins, Stephen Hawkins, or David R. Hawkins. It's probably because I saw the R. At any rate, no excuses. So David R. Hawkins. This is the next in a whole series of books that are all worth reading. But there's something that struck my eye. This is from 2001, so it's about 20-something years old. But it doesn't age. I especially recommend this to Christians, frankly. But there's something here that really struck my eye because it's a central question in the 21st century. Let's see if I can find it. Well, let me do the table of contents first. So we have the presence of God, the spiritual process, pathway of consciousness, discussions and lectures, and then the appendices. But this is a paragraph that caught my eye because this is a very important question for our century. Preface. The scope of this work is immense. It includes not only a detailed subjective report of the very advanced states of spiritual consciousness, traditionally called enlightenment, but for the first time, it correlates and recontextualizes spiritual information in such a manner as to make it comprehensible to reason and the intellect. So now, reason and the intellect, this is an ancient problem. We have some clues because we know from ancient Greece, for example, and India. I'm talking ancient, not the Middle Ages, Sufis, but I'm talking about the Pythagoras. Oh, that guy was a full-blown mystic. I mean, he had a whole following, and he was into the esoteric stuff. And I suspect that he wasn't the only one. And so these things were well known in the past, at least when it came to basic mathematics, that there was a correlation between mathematics, or there was a connection between mathematics, reality, the spiritual life, and then spiritual understanding, of which Pythagoras actually is something of an exemplar if you make allowances for the culture, etc. So now the question is this: can you get there with just reason? And it'd be easy to just say yes, you can. I mean, you can certainly get to the place. And so now, let me just explain something. In this book, David Hawkins talks about basically scales of logarithmic and exponential and other things I'm not recalling at the moment. But basically, he makes a distinction between the linear scale and an exponential scale or something like that. Now, we have common understanding, and I would hope so, it's been 100 years, of quantum mechanics. And so now we can get into the nature of the fabric of reality itself. Now we can talk about what we know and what we don't know. We can talk about matter not being at all like what it appears to be. We already had relativity, so we know that time is this very squirrely thing, as is space. And I cover these in other places, but the point is that the caveat comes down to, yes, you can understand all these things intellectually. It's not the same as being there, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a peculiar, I'm going to use the word experience. We'll call it roughly experience, although I don't think the brain is particularly involved. in consciousness, or this uncovering, in which it becomes manifestly obvious that love and truth and beauty are all the same thing. Now, I can't translate that into a rational sentence, but that's what happens. I was just going through, looking at YouTubes or something, and I ran into this guy. I'm going to butcher his name. Do you know of a physicist named Faggino or something like that? Fagino or something? Anyway, some physicist happened across it accidentally, and it changed his life. And I think what becomes clear is that at least to me, I think if you're able, then you definitely should use both. But if you had to choose one or the other, I would choose the spiritual experience, definitely. On the other hand, you can get to quite an understanding of the illusory nature of reality just using quantum mechanics and relativity and just modern 21st century physics. So at any rate, that's kind of my opinion at the moment on that. The remarkable thing is that the mystics, including Pythagoras and also quite a few of the Sufis and others as well, they're able to intuit these deep scientific truths, like the absence of time or the relativity of space. Of space and time, and the final non-existence of the apparent, right? So who knows what kind of intuitions could be ahead of us in the future. So here it is, the eye of the eye. Now Hawkins, bless his heart, was a pioneer in this, and he did a lot, but I think that he suffers from the 20th century American preoccupation with putting everything on a scale and putting everything on a although he talks about not being linear, his exponential scales are linear in a certain way, or his logarithmic scales. And to do that with spiritual understanding, I think, is not something that I agree with. But I do, on the other hand, really recommend this book to anybody that's interested, not particularly for atheists, there's better books for atheists, but for those of the Christian persuasion, I think it's a fine book to start out with. Okay, here we go. What have you learned?
Well, on that note, I've been thinking about something we had talked about this week, where you had given an example.
I'm sorry, you sounded underwater for a moment. Go ahead.
You had given the example of the thought experiment of imagining a Optimus robot driving a car, perceiving an object in the road ahead and stopping, and comparing that to a person's experience of doing the same thing.
Yes, that's a thought experiment.
And asking if there's a difference in and I've been thinking about it, and it's like I think there's a difference, but I have trouble, using logic or words to or even like
okay, because our language is crude, and we don't differentiate between mind, cognition, and consciousness or experience, right? So that's difficult to articulate, especially to someone who doesn't admit the possibility of absolute, or a foundational awareness or consciousness. Did that sentence make sense to you?
Yeah, but even then,
so go ahead. So let me give you another thought experiment. Maybe we can work from there.
Sure.
Imagine a universe with nobody in it, no living thing in it. What's happening? Can you even do that? Can you imagine a universe without an experiencer of that universe?
What comes to mind is just an image like of a desert, and the wind blowing, but that's from a perspective.
Exactly. So imagine a universe, and there's no living thing there to perceive it. We could throw in a few calculators, a few iPhones, and a few computers if you want.
But to imagine anything, you have to imagine it from a perspective, right?
Yes, but we're taking the perspective of outside that universe.
But is that a limitation of us, that we can't imagine anything outside a perspective?
Very good, very nice. But what is imagination? What is imagination? Imagination, right? Is there an image without somebody, without? Now, we could, in this universe, we could put a camera, and we could put a camera and hooked up to a oscilloscope, or hooked up to another machine, right, into that into that empty universe. But that is creating image, no? That is imagination, I guess. I don't know. What does nation mean? Anticipation, imagination. Ancient, I think, is just adds the verb to it, doesn't it, or the noun? Cogitation, rumination. Although nation is a word, so let's get the etymology. The question really, folks, is can machines be conscious? And that's a good question. And we're going to get there. But right now, let's take a look at this universe, both from the inside and outside, this thought universe, from the inside and the outside.
So image, picture to oneself.
Oh, that's interesting. Imagination is a picture to oneself, or?
Middle English via Old French from Latin imaginatio, from the verb imaginari, picture to oneself.
Oh, imaginary, I like that. Okay.
And Asian is a common suffix that comes from Latin atio.
Suffix, yes.
Used to form nouns indicating action or process.
Okay, so that just turns it into a noun. So imagine is, okay, how do we get on imagination? You were saying, well, you could imagine this or you could imagine that, right? And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. We just had a universe where nothing was making an image, okay? Then to that, where nobody was in it, no living creature. Let's leave it to humans right now. No human is inside this universe. What's happening? I mean, what could be happening? Lots and lots and lots of stuff, but none of it makes any difference, or you couldn't even say it existed, right? Now, to that empty universe, we're going to add a camera and an oscilloscope. Now something's happening in that universe. But that's because at the end of that oscilloscope or that camera, we're going to look at it. It's like quantum mechanics, right? In the beginning, where it doesn't matter whether the observer is a human, it doesn't matter, or another living creature, or whether it's a machine. The machine is eventually going to be looked at by a human, and that's what triggers the whole. I think that's what triggers the, however you want to call it. You could call it collapse of the wave function. I wouldn't do it that way, but that's what triggers entanglement. Right? Is that making sense? This is an important question.
This part, I'm not familiar enough with quantum entanglement.
All right, well, let's leave quantum entanglement out of it. Well, yes, you are. So the cat's either dead or alive. Schrödinger's famous thought experiment. The cat, you have a box, and the cat's in a superposition of both dead and alive. The minute someone looks at it, or looks at a machine looking at it, then that, I'm going to use loose language, branch of the quantum wave forks. So you either live in the universe where the cat is alive, or you live in the universe where the cat is dead. But because you're entangled with that universe, like saying you're entangled with a cat the minute you look at it, we're entangled right now. That's part of why we see the same universe or whatever. Because you're entangled with that cat, everything in your life is entangled with that cat. You're now in that branch of the universe. Now, this is just using multiverse theory or whatever, which I think is grossly overused, but, we'll leave that alone. So in this, you tell me, if nobody ever looked at that oscilloscope or ever looked at that camera, would anything have ever happened in that universe, theoretical universe that we're talking about?
Well, there must have been some process for that camera to be set up. So there is some.
Oh, you're talking historically.
Yeah, so there is some.
Yeah, but now you're stepping out of the thought experiment.
But it's like for
the minute you set up a camera, you set up a universe. You're right.
Right.
And so if you go in there and set up the camera, you've started a universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we've made a distinction though between dumb machines, oscilloscopes, and cameras, without consciousness on the other side of it. Actually, I think this is a fairly good argument for a differentiation of consciousness from non-consciousness.
Can you elaborate?
All right. How many different, let me lead up to it a bit. How many different fields, quantum or otherwise quantum, photoelectric, gravitational, strong electromagnetic, the weak force, how many fields like that, quantum fields in which things pop out, do we have in our universe? We know of, let's say 6. Let's just say 6 or 5 or 3 or whatever you want. The point is, if we weren't here to use those fields, do they have an existence? Oh no, I'm going about this the wrong way, I can tell. Let me make it more simple. Ask the question again. The point is that our universe is made of the fields that we can observe. That's my point. Your world and my world does not include, it barely includes, the fact that we're constantly being irradiated with gamma radiation. And that there's neutrinos passing through us and the walls of the ceiling and everything else all the time. That's not part of our world, but it is kind of, because we can theorize about them. Gamma radiation, let's say. Right? So it becomes real in our world. Now, how many other things do you think there are like that in this universe about which we know nothing, and it's not part of our conscious world?
And who knows, there could be an infinite.
Exactly. There's likely to be an infinite. I mean, look, what do they call it? The vector space, you guys? You call it a vector space? Of possible, or look at, what's his name? Oh, man. I'm getting old. The math guy, Milgram? No. Who's the math guy? Stephen Wolfram.
Who?
Stephen Wolfram.
Oh, yeah.
And his, what do they call his, what does he call his, his universe of possible numbers, etc.?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, you should be. I mean, just to YouTube. At any rate, so it's all the possibilities, right? So there's an infinite number of possibilities. We know that, right? Even if we created a certain thing that could observe certain things, that would make them pop into existence, I suppose. So now we have a universe with no observer. Why would anything become real if there's not an observer? About this theoretical closed universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of which we're observing from the outside. We're asking it nothing. We're telling it nothing. God knows what it's doing inside, but none of it matters. None of it means anything. There's no particular information. And we should talk about information and energy and matter. And maybe you could help me with something. But do you see the fundamental difference? If nothing goes in or out of that universe, if nothing is processed by a living creature, either in the past or in the future of that universe, then what happened? Why would we even call it a universe? Do you see what I'm saying? So the universe is something that we perceive and participate in, or something like that. I'm going to have to forgive me because I'm going to use a lot of language very loosely.
I had a thought.
Go ahead.
I had a thought related to this, but our universe, everything in our universe has to be related to our survival in some way. Anything that we can perceive is related to our survival in some way.
Whoa. I think you're in the wrong century. I think you need to go back to a heliocentric, or a world where everything revolves around the Earth, right? There's a lot in this universe that does not particularly help us with survival.
But it's like what?
Gamma radiation, or what are the radiation that's supposed to kill you from the sun? And extremes of temperature, and droughts, and volcanoes, and saltwater oceans, and there's a lot of things that are particularly...
Our perception of it helps us with survival.
Okay, that's different. Our perception of things in the universe all seem to be centered around our own survival. Not only our own survival, but our own, well-being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or our own curiosity or something like that. Well, do you think that's a coincidence? No, absolutely not.
No, what I'm saying is that there's probably all sorts of things that don't affect our survival, and therefore we can't perceive them. We develop the capacity to perceive things based on
that doesn't work either, because, for example, nobody knew what vitamin C was until people started dropping like flies from scurvy as they were crossing the Atlantic, right? So, I don't think that logic.
Now that information.
Ascorbic acid, vitamin C was discovered. I just want for the audience. Ascorbic acid, vitamin C was discovered when sailors started getting really sick from scurvy. The same thing with iodine and rickets. But go ahead, say it again, what you just said.
Right. Therefore, we've developed the capacity to perceive vitamin C.
Very good. Okay.
Right. If we didn't die from the lack of it, we would have no idea it exists.
Okay, so I think what you meant to say was that the world that humans are preoccupied with is preoccupied with our well-being, survival, minimization of pain, right? But that's different than saying the universe is like that.
But the universe that we can perceive or even conceive of is directly related to survival.
I'm going to have to disagree with you there.
So, what's the disagreement, or what's the logic of disagreement?
It's not logic. It's an experience. It's experience.
Right. And so that's where I was. That kind of backs up what I was saying, where I can't find the logic to. I'm looking for a logical explanation of like the difference, because a machine can perceive things and survive and stuff, but there's no, I guess the direct experience is the argument, right?
Okay, there's three levels here, right?
Not explaining.
One is realization, right? When you once and for all and finally see reality for what it really is, which is like something totally outside of the human realm. I mean, we're talking about the realm of God, Okay, that's enlightenment or waking up.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one is human cognition and logic and reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one doesn't even have logic or reason. It's just, well, I mean, it's not human logic or reason. It's like a fungus or an animal's or a bacterial's logic and reason.
So,
and then the next one down is logic, is no cognition with no life to it, like machines. See, life is something that we haven't got our hands around, although we've been studying biology and everything else as hard as we can or whatever for as long as we can. We don't have any idea what life is. Is all life one thing? Some people argue that. Because if you look at our membranes, they're basically the same. Because many bacteria and many single-cell creatures are immortal, right? They don't reproduce. So when they divide, they just stay alive. So they've been around for billions of years, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the membranes that we have, or the components of our membrane, were also part of this same evolutionary tree. And so they argue that although there's the apparent separation, that all of life is one thing. Interesting hypothesis or whatever. But I don't know how we could disprove that. And it does make sense with whatever you call it, waking up experience or realization. You realize that there's only one force, there's only one mover in the universe, and it's consciousness. It's not, and love or beauty. And it's not tied to an animal. But I don't want to get into the spirit, just proclamations of faith. I'm not interested in that. I'm asking you to differentiate between that last level of non-life cognition, reason, and logic, and life, reason, cognition, and logic. Basically, the difference between biology and non-biology. Now, can you tell me at what point a computer will develop life? It's inconceivable that a computer would develop life from everything we know about current understanding. From our current understanding, the biology of one cell is so complex that we can't even dream of getting there. Right? Number two, do you know how many watts does it take for you to think with your brain?
I don't know.
About 20 watts. Ask the AI what kind of power requirements there would be for a machine to do the equivalent what's in the human brain, one human brain. Ask it. I think you're going to need a nuclear reactor. So 20 watts is a pretty weak light bulb, folks, for those of you that aren't electrically inclined. A very weak light bulb. Hmm. 20 watts is about like the light you have in your glove compartment of your car. Okay, what does it say? Just read it for the audience because this is good for them to learn about.
So, key points of estimation. 1, neurons and synapses.
What is this? Is this O1? What AI is this? Just offhand.
It doesn't tell me which one.
Okay, go ahead.
It's ChatGPT. Neurons and synapses. The human brain has approximately 86 billion neurons, each connecting to other neurons via synapses. Each neuron can have up to 10,000 synapses, resulting in roughly 100 trillion synaptic connections.
Okay, so we have 100 trillion synaptic connections. So in this guy right here, We have 100 and trillion. Okay, every cell in here makes 100,000 connections, right? And we have 100 and we have how many? 86 billion neurons.
86 billion neurons.
Okay, each of 10, which is making 10,000 connections for how many trillion connections?
So 100 trillion total connections.
Okay, 100 trillion. All right, keep going.
The firing rate range from 0.1 hertz to 100 hertz. So if you assume a 10 hertz average firing rate,
so 10 that's conservative, but 10 it fires 10 times per second. Each one of these synaptic connections, all right? 10 times per second. All right, keep going. This is fun.
So the brain processes a quadrillion synaptic events per second.
Okay, so a quadrillion, what is that? A billion million? I mean, a billion trillion?
It's 10 to the power of 15.
Woo! So we're already into the realm of us not being able to grok it. So how many quadrillion? 1 quadrillion?
1 quadrillion.
1 quadrillion for how long? 1 second?
Per second.
Okay, per second. 1 quadrillion. We can't even... I mean, we could look it up, but it's basically 1,000 trillion, right?
Yeah.
1,000 trillion, a quadrillion, 10 to the 15th per second. Keep going.
So modern supercomputers are measured in flops, which is floating point operations per second.
Okay.
To emulate the brain's activity, estimates suggest a requirement of 10 to the 15 flops to 10 to the 18 flops.
Okay.
For equivalent computational power. The most powerful supercomputers today are in the exaflop range, which is around 10 to the 15 flops, meaning we are only just approaching the computational capability needed to simulate the brain.
One brain. One brain. Of one person. So it's, folks, every one of you's got one of these, right? Every one of you's got a brain here. So you should use it. It's like that's what it's for. That's why we were given it. We weren't given claws or hooves or horns or anything like that. We were given brains. So look, okay, go ahead. How much power does that computer consume in a day?
So those supercomputers consume about 20 megawatts of power
per day.
Compared to 20. Per day would be, 20 megawatts times 24 hours.
No, let's sleep for 7 hours.
Um, 340,000 kilowatt hours.
All right. How much is that going to cost us? Okay, but look, the point's made. People can look further into it if they want. But basically, now, I think they're really patting themselves on the back too soon because they're saying that with they can do a quadrillion units per second for, let's say, 18 hours, and that we're approaching that with our biggest supercomputers.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know anything about glial cells yet. They don't know anything about cell-to-cell communication that doesn't involve the axon and doesn't involve the synapse. So we're thinking we got it, but we're nowhere close to this, right? Much less the software. So there's no place, we're not even remotely close. We can't do a single cell. So now, in the state of our ignorance, I'm asking you to differentiate between life and non-life using computation.
The main thing that comes to mind is that life is self-propagating.
Yeah, well, some programs are too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that can't be it. They're not really self-propagating because they're taking the energy out of the wall, which is coming from the sun, and going through some kind of process, right?
What do you mean?
So, well, actually, life does that too. At this level,
Yeah.
life does that. We eat kale,
Yeah.
things like that, and so we take the energy
We all
from
do
the sun. From the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you eat kale. I don't eat kale, but okay, never mind that. All right, so do you get the point now? The point is we talk about life as if we had some clue. And I say we don't have a clue. And underneath life, I mean, there's life with a small L and there's life with a in capital letters, which is the substrate, if that's reality. Now, do you hear what I'm saying? I'm saying life and consciousness are the same thing. I don't know that. I haven't studied enough little critters or whatever. But going back to your original thing about the Optimus and the self-driving car, we don't need to add the self-driving car. We could just talk about Optimus, or we could just talk about the car. It has no experience. It's got a memory. It's got a power supply.
Why is that? Why does that have no experience? But say a cockroach might have experience.
There you go. See, now see how wonderful this world. Leave cockroaches out of it. Say butterflies.
Sure.
Why do butterflies have experience? Boom.
Right.
You're way past the edge of our understanding. And I mean, I know everybody's enamored of AI right now, and good. It's fun. It's interesting. It's very interesting what these computers can do with language. But, well, ask the AI. See what it says. It's fun to go up against the limits of these AIs. Try O1, by the way. I hear Gemini's good too, huh?
Yeah.
And free?
I think so for now. It's thinking.
Good.
Determining whether and to what degree a butterfly has experience depends on how we define the term. Generally, when we speak of an organism's experience, we're referring to some capacity to receive sensory input from the environment, process it, and use that information to guide behavior.
Stop.
This usually involves...
Stop.
What?
Stop, because everything it just said could be said of a Tesla.
Yeah.
All right, so that's not helpful. Keep going.
Well, it goes on to say that it has sensory perception, response and behavior, learning and memory.
All that applies to a iPhone, pretty much.
Neurobiological basis.
There we go. Now, what's that mean? Neurobiological basis.
Well, it says the presence of neurons, synapses, and neurotransmitters enables butterflies to integrate sensory data and produce behaviorally adaptive outcomes. It's crucial to note, however, that having neural processing does not automatically imply rich subjective experience, just a capacity to handle inputs in a meaningful, survival-oriented way.
Okay, so far the AI is retarded, but keep going.
And then philosophical and subjective considerations. If by experience we mean something akin to human consciousness, an inner subjective world, emotions, thoughts, and a sense of self, this becomes a more difficult proposition.
A sense of self is not something that a sense of self is something a computer can do. Let's go through all of those.
Mm-hmm.
Emotion, no. Not yet. What else?
Thoughts.
Thoughts a computer could do.
And a sense of self.
Sense of self, you could just program that in there.
Yeah.
So it missed the point. It hasn't helped us at all.
And it says, from a strict biological standpoint, there's no direct evidence that a butterfly has introspective awareness, self-reflection, or emotional states similar to humans.
Okay. All right. I'm going to save us some time and say we should have said monkeys, I guess, or dogs. Or you could just ask it, what about a dog? Just say, what about a dog?
Sure. It says the answer differs in meaningful ways due to dog's more complex nervous system.
We asked what experience was, didn't we?
No.
Okay, at any rate, I think what you're going to get at the end of all this, they're going to say, oh yeah, that's something that seems to be involved in your nervous system. Experience is not something we would attribute to a machine. But experience is the core of our being. That's what we are, is experience. And now we've known this since, before the 2nd century, I mean, Pythagoras knew it. There's something else, and we in the modern world are avoiding this question because we have no way to approach it. So getting back to the question of, can you do this without, the spiritual overlay? I'm going to have to say not really, because the spiritual overlay is a way to get rid of the egoic and instinctive preoccupations. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's more of a technology. The spiritual technology allows you to, for once in your life, to not put yourself at the center of the universe. And when you do that, and you're fortunate, then your preoccupations with your own egoic gain, or your own need for food, water, sex, or sleep, when those are put to the side, then it's boom. And if you want to call that spiritual, call it spiritual, but you can also call it just pragmatic. And so that, I think, is necessary. Now, can someone develop a theory based around this reality? Yeah, they could. But it'd be like someone being an expert at collecting recipes and maybe even cooking, but they're never able to taste, which is a shame, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Well, what fun. Okay. Go ahead.
So are humans the only ones able to, put their ego aside?
Well,
like that?
Not all humans have the ego. If you're young enough, you don't have an ego. You still have the instinctual drives, though. And so we make this big deal about, well, can the creature or can the machine recognize itself? Right? Self-awareness. When you have true self-awareness, there is no self, there is no other. And you just do what you do because you do it. It's Taoism, 101. Is that making sense to you?
Slightly. Okay,
well, keep thinking about it. So good. The Optimus self-driving car thought experiment, I think, did its job. Now think about a universe with no experience or awareness in it, and ask yourself: could there be such a thing? All right. I mean, these are serious questions, and you're young and you still have a good mind, right? So let's do that. Anything else on your mind?
You said you wanted to talk about information.
Yeah, it's kind of a separate too. Yeah, so help me out here, right? Energy. Okay, this is Einstein's famous equation. Forgive me for being simple-minded, folks. I'm not a physicist, but okay, what is matter other than information? We see this, we go, okay, well, that's plastic blue, it's oblong, it's got a string on the end of it, it's got some slots, and then we look more closely, we say, well, that's metal and that's plastic, and that's got temperature, and that's got a shape, and so on and so forth. So what is matter beyond information? I know this sounds silly, but what is it beyond information?
Well, you could say it's a special type of information.
Well, yeah. No, granted, it's a special kind of, you could say that. Stipulated.
What do you mean stipulated?
Stipulated, that's a legal term for saying, we accept that as a fact and we're not going to argue it.
Got it.
All right, so that's another thought experiment. What is matter other than information? All right, and then maybe we could take it up from there. Pardon me?
Well, first, before we answer that, what is information?
Well, these days I'm thinking if you take E equals mc squared, information is energy. Now I'm going off the deep end, folks, so everybody's excused. So as far as I can tell, energy and information are the same thing. There may be some translatory steps, but they're completely intertwined. You can't erase a bit without using a certain number of joules or fraction of joule. Right?
Yeah.
So if you can't erase information without energy, there's implications of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we're going to find that energy and information are the same thing by E equals mc squared. You could just take that, fill in the things, energy, matter, speed of light squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then play with it. I think it was Landauer or somebody, or maybe it was Stephen Hawkins, was saying that there's a limit to the number of bits that you could compute with any computer, because if you try to do more than that, you'll create a black hole.
Mm.
Now, I think that's pretty much consensus. Now ask yourself, what are the implications of that? But this is all old man just speculating, right? See, you have to realize that you have with direct perception, you can see all kinds of things that aren't obvious to other people. Mm. And one of them is we know that whatever it is, it's all the same thing, right? Eventually, it's going to translate into the same thing. So if you could tell me about energy without information, or information about energy, I'm all ears. Tell me about it. Or matter without information. I mean, what is matter without information? That's how we define it.
Right.
That's how it exists. So to me, that seems obvious. That's obviously obvious, right? And then if matter is information, what are we going to do with this equation that says energy equals matter times the speed of light squared? I mean, I'm just playing around like a kid. I mean, this is just playtime, but what are we supposed to do with that equation? Energy equals matter times the speed of light squared. The speed of light squared is just a big number.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have energy equals matter. Yeah, no kidding. But if matter is information, that means energy is information too. Okay. It's fun to think about things like this. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a computationalist. I'm just an old man playing around having a good time, right? But maybe you can help me with this, because it looks to me like energy and matter are different manifestations of the same thing. And now, what is information? You asked me what information was, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a qubit or it's a bit, and both of them require energy to do anything with. Don't they? You can't compute without energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, that's just playtime, fun time. Anything else, or can we do a little Avatamsaka just for fun, a little further into the book, maybe?
Sure.
And the reason for this is that this is in the 21st century. We need something that helps us expand our minds, right? And for example, the relativity of time, the if people are going to start going off and on, I mean, going off on multiverses and stuff like that, well, then you need to be able to think about that kind of stuff. We're also large numbers. This book specifically deals with very large numbers, but even then our shiny little brains can't even do a quadrillion. I mean, can't even do a quadrillion very well. Just pick a book, any book.
I'm on page 226.
All right. But I'm serious about asking you those questions, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So think about those.
Mm-hmm. I started reading Nexus, which talks about information.
And that's by whom? I forgot.
The guy who did 21 Lessons for the 21st Century and Sapiens.
Oh,
Sapiens guy.
So Harari, yeah. Well, he's not a physicist or a computation. Yeah. I'm not sure I can recommend that.
Mm.
But that's me, right? Now you've read Deutsch's book.
Mm-hmm.
Who else is there? Frankly, Stephen Hawkins is really radical. If I just started reading it, or I just finished his book called, oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember, The Grand Design. And he's I mean, he has a right to. I don't, but he's radical. He has to be, right? But the poor scientists, they're like, the best we've got is our best model, and that's that. That's as close as we're going to get to reality, is our best model. But the best model is, got strengths and limitations. Why don't you start at the third paragraph?
Turning to the right?
Yeah. Okay, so now we're still in the flower bank world. All right, flower bank world.
Yep.
And do a bit of it, okay? Let's go.
Sure. Turning to the right of this sapphire ray sea of fragrant water, there is another sea of fragrant water called diamond orb adorned floor, with a world system called Indra's net studded with wonderful jewels, composed of sounds produced by the knowledge of universal virtue. At the bottom of this world system is a world called Lotus Blossom Net.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Hold your spot. I want to speak to the audience a little bit. Now, in texts like this, which is a sutra, which is meant to be basically chanted, here they're talking about these jewels. So there'll be jewels, clouds of jewels. There'll be banners of jewels. There'll be the fragrances of sandalwood. There'll be sounds of fragrances and so on and so forth. The point is that all of these things are at that time the most valuable physical things there are. I mean, obviously everybody thinks that diamonds and rubies and sapphires are beautiful and valuable. So they're saying, look at this world and look at the beauty and how precious it is, right? So I guess what I want people to understand is you don't take this literally. Although you can, and visually it's kind of beautiful, you can also take it to mean, look at this thing of beyond price, this thing of incredible value and beauty, and then in addition to that, by expanding it gradually like this, you could have it like, if we took every step to get to a quadrillion, we could probably get there, but we'd have to probably start at 1 million, to be honest. Then we'd have to get to 1 billion, then we'd have to get to 1 trillion, and then we'd have to work to get to a quadrillion. That they're helping us with all of those things here. Okay, so I'm sorry, keep going. I just wanted to give the audience that.
Sure. At the bottom of this world system is a world called Lotus Blossom Net, shaped like a polar mountain resting on a sea of banners and mountains of beautiful flowers, covered by clouds of Indra's nets of diamonds from the sphere of Buddhahood, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called wisdom, universally aware of the body of reality. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms.
Slow down a bit. Go ahead.
is a world called endless sunlight. The Buddha there is called mind of supremely great awareness. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called radiating subtle light in all directions. The Buddha there is called endless power of clouds of great virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called tree blossom banner. The Buddha there is called sound of the cosmos of boundless knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called pearl canopy. The Buddha there is called
transit. I'm going to read with you.
Above this, past as many worlds as atoms
in the Buddha field,
a world called boundless sound. Buddha there is called omniscient
awareness.
Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called visible everywhere. The Buddha there is called appearing before all beings. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called invincible light of Indra's net. The Buddha is called clouds of flames of golden light from a spotless sun. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called jewel-studded. The Buddha there is called supreme wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called ground of undefiled light. The Buddha there is called pure mountain with all powers. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called constantly emitting sounds praising Buddha's virtues. The Buddha there is called space-like mind of universal awareness. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called high bank of flames. The Buddha there is called great cloud banners majestically appearing in all quarters. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called sanctuary adorned with light. The Buddha there is called incomparable knowledge illumining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called producing ornaments of all jewels. The Buddha there is called king of mystic powers widely liberating sentient beings. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called beautiful palace adorned with light. The Buddha there is called vast intellect establishing all truths. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called undefiled tranquility. The Buddha there is called not appearing in vain. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called banner of crystal flowers. The Buddha there is called auspicious sound delighting the mind. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in the Buddha field, is a world called repository of universal clouds, shaped like a palace, resting on a perfume sea of various palaces, covered by clouds of lamps of all jewels, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called king of mystic powers of supreme awareness.
It's always, and then it turns to the right, and then we have a whole other series of mystic worlds. Forgive me for starting to read with you, but it's especially delightful to read this with somebody else. If you can find somebody to read it with you, it's much easier going, and it feels good, and it's just easy. It's just better, right? And then eventually, what will happen is it'll turn into a chant. Above this passage, and then you have all this imagery too. And so, they used to get together in group. That it used to. They still do. But it's not very fashionable, at least not in the West. Getting together in groups and reading this beautiful, beautiful sutra and scripture. Okay, sir. Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you for that. Any questions? We have a little time. So you've got your thought experiment squared away. You've got a universe with no observer, a universe with observing machines that never get looked at, and a universe with machines that do get looked at by humans, right? Or other living things. and then we also have if how do we differentiate matter from information? How can we do that logically and scientifically? I mean, what is matter beyond information? And then, so those are the thinking tasks. So, again, let me reiterate, because I'm just saying what's always been known for a long time. Although it's a little bit more, it feels more interesting in 2021 than it may have, in the 2nd century BC or 6th century BC, because we know more about these things. And that is the place for logic and reason and scientific inquiry in the larger context of awakening. Now, scientific understanding never hurt anybody in true Dharma. Spiritual insight has helped a lot of people, starting with Pythagoras, at least. And a lot of these guys that they tell you science is like, scientists don't believe it. Well, Newton was certainly a theist, and so but the real question is, can one get there through the intellect alone? And I'm going to have to say, as much as I would like not to have to say it, you can't do it. The true insight, the true experience, is something that has to be tasted by yourself. Has to be. We use the word experience, but it's beyond experience. It's something else outside of human. You just get trapped up, and so that's why it's important to do both at the same time, in my opinion. Plus, you have a better life. Okay, so, sir.
I had another thought experiment that I was having this week, and it's regarding information that I just remembered.
Oh, good.
So it's regarding what is true information. And the thought experiment
true
is
information. Go ahead.
Yeah. What does it mean for information to be true versus false? And can you?
I think that's a malformed sentence and question. Truth and falseness depends entirely on the context, right? Something would be true in one context and false in another. I'm reminded of, have you ever seen those color fields where then they'll put a different color? Let's say you have all green, and then you put an intense red in the middle. Is that true or false? It's much more. Well, that's probably not a good idea. But those things you do with perception, true and false. I mean, information is something that's interpreted. It's raw. It can't have a valence like that, can it?
I don't think so. I think it can only have
okay,
an
so
effect.
Look, all right, so look, we can define truth and falseness, and we can do that in a language like mathematics, or we can do it with English, right. But we've defined it that way. Is it true that the sun that Jupiter is cold? So we can define truth and falseness in mathematical schemes, right? Mm-hmm. Or in collectively or whatever, but information by itself. You give me an example of information that's inherently true or false.
Well, no, that's where I was going. There is none. But even within a context of, like, what does it mean? Even within the context, what does it mean for, like, if you say Jupiter's cold, what does it mean for that statement to be true versus false?
Well, if you live on Mars or the Earth, it's true. But if you live on Pluto, it's false. Right? I mean, presumably Pluto is colder. Do people still talk about Pluto?
Not much.
Poor guy. At any rate, one of those planets that's way out there, presumably further from the sun, and presumably, no, not just as stipulated. Its temperature is lower than that of Jupiter. That statement will be false. Also, there's Gödel, right? Remember, there are statements that cannot be proven true or false within any given system. But that's a different thing. That's good. But did you have something in mind? True or false information?
Didn't you have a tweet about consensus or something?
Oh, scientific consensus in science means squat. Doesn't mean anything. So one of the things that's been in vogue, it's a horrible thing, is saying, trust the science. The majority of scientists are always right. That's just patently ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that whole thing is just moronic. As you know, I don't want to even dignify it with examples, but there's so many examples of the history of science. Right? And that doesn't mean you can't use it, and there's a consensus of information that builds up, and it's hopefully somewhat true, but it's only true within a model. And now we're lost in between models. We can't use the old reality, and our models of quantum mechanics don't work well enough for us to do anything saying, well, there must be other universes, right? Well, there are, but not in that manner, I guess is the thing. And then people are talking about conscious machines like they had some idea of what they were talking about. They have no idea what consciousness is, much less programming it. So it's a fun time. I mean, everybody gets to have fun. And then you make a lifetime out of it, and then you get paid, and you call yourself a scientist or whatever. I mean, there's a lot. What I'm trying to say is there's all kinds of things for young people to get interested in. And now you got the AIs to talk to about this. Do you know that question that we ask about the how much power would be required to do the computations of a single human brain? That would have taken a week's work.
Right.
Now you can move on to more interesting questions.
Right. Well, and just to finalize this, the thought experiment that I had was if you, and it's related to like the emperor's new clothes.
All right.
If you know, there's a kingdom and the king has this new robe and it's invisible. And he asks the citizens, like, what do you think of my new robe?
He's very proud of it, too.
People with their own eyes can see that he's not wearing anything. But if you ask anybody, if they said, well, there is no robe, then they'll kill them. And so nobody will say there is no robe. So the truth, what is the truth in that context?
But
is the truth that he has a robe? Because if you admit,
you left out the end of the story. Do you know the end of the story?
I forget.
Some little kid, not knowing about the social rules or not knowing this or that or whatever, some kid, in other words, e.g., innocent mind, playful mind, real mind, right? Says, hey, he's not wearing any clothes. And then everybody goes, oh, yeah. And they're all embarrassed. But to me, the key point is that there's like Jesus said, you have to be a child to enter into some places, right? Yeah, and like in Zen, too, it's axiomatic that you need a certain kind of mind. That's a beginner's mind, a child's mind, a playful mind, one that does things just for the fun of it, just for the hell of it, just to see what, happens, see what happens. So it's a great story, but don't leave out the last part. But would you say he has clothes or not? I'd say no, he does not have clothes. But only.
But that statement you can only say because you live outside of that situation. You could not say that. You could not say that if you lived within that situation. Say they killed anybody who said that publicly, they would kill them, right? And so you would not, if you were, you might internally have that thought, but externally you would never say it. And so there's a system.
We've had a lot of those thoughts in the last 5 years, right?
Right.
I mean, so, it's like saying Castro has no.
It's just got me thinking that somehow this like information is related to the information like being able to survive.
Well, can information be destroyed?
Yes.
How?
Well, the information itself, if you have a hard drive, you can destroy the hard drive, right?
This is actually this is something for me to go think about, and among other things, is that they say that when information goes into a black hole, that somehow or another it's conserved on the surface of the black hole in a ratio that's proportional to the surface area. What does that mean?
I don't know.
I think they mean the entropy. I think they mean something like the entropy or something, something along to do with it. So let's take the letter C. That's information.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into a big. Okay, this is going to get into a big problem because actually it's a good one though. I tell you what. Let's both think about it because what does it mean that information can't be destroyed in a black hole? What does it mean that you can if information can be put on a page, right? And then you burn that page, and apparently somehow the information is still extractable. But I don't think it means that the information is extractable in a particular sequence that's meaningful to us. It just means that the entropy or the disorder or something like that is preserved or something. So we're just playing around. There's whole fields of study. And these are great fields of study too, by the way. For people who want to know what to do when the AIs come, somehow or another, more than a few people that I respect a lot say that information cannot be destroyed. Let's figure out what that means. Or maybe I tell you what, just ask just to get us started,
Well,
ask the AI. What does it mean when people say information can't be destroyed? Ask the smartest AI you got. Real quick.
Sure. I think it depends on what the definition of information is.
Precisely, and that's what I want to get to because I think it's related to entropy. I mean, by definition, it's related to entropy in physics, not in physics, but in computation. In physics, I'm not sure, but I think so, yeah, too, because it's less uncertainty. Less uncertainty means less entropy. I'm going to make an idiot of myself. Forgive me, everybody. This is just fun time, play around time.
Saying that destruction of information is somewhat illusory. The ink molecules and the patterns they form before burning have been transformed, not erased. The smoke, ashes, and heat radiated away some record of the initial state, albeit scrambled in complex microscopic.
Albeit scrambled, okay.
Albeit.
What was the exact question you asked it?
Can information be destroyed?
Good. All right, keep reading.
In principle, if one had perfect information about every particle and its quantum state, one might reconstruct what was once written. This would be impossibly difficult in practice, but it underscores a subtle point. Macroscopic destruction of information is often just a practical irretrievability rather than an absolute annihilation.
Very nice. Does it say anything more? So this is why folks are saying, well, no, they aren't. They're saying you can't retrieve information as we currently conceive it or as it was organized prior to going into the black hole, but it's preserved, and some of it comes out like Hawkins radiation, right? Something like that.
According to classical general relativity, any object, and thus the information it carries, that crosses a black hole's event horizon becomes unreachable to outside observers. And when the black hole eventually evaporates via Hawking radiation, the naive interpretation suggests that the information that fell in is lost forever. This scenario gave rise to the famous black hole information paradox in theoretical physics. Stephen Hawking originally argued that the Hawking radiation emitted by a black hole during its evaporation is purely thermal and therefore carries no information about what fell inside. If the black hole disappears entirely, it would seemingly destroy that information, violating the principle that quantum mechanics forbids fundamental information loss.
Oh, stop right there. Quantum mechanics forbids. Say it again.
Forbids information loss.
Oh, you can see why, right? But go ahead, keep going. So I'm not crazy after all, folks. I'm not. Keep going.
Over decades of debate and research, it is now widely believed among most physicists working on quantum gravity that information is not truly destroyed by black holes. Instead, quantum gravity effects and the subtle correlation in Hawking radiation should ensure that all information that falls into a black hole is eventually encoded in the outgoing radiation, though extremely scrambled and effectively unrecoverable without extraordinary means. This is still an active area of research with many attempts, such as the holographic principle that adds...
Ooh, the holographic principle. We love that guy. We love that one.
And the concept of the black hole complementarity to explain exactly how the information is preserved.
Bravo. Okay, so in my opinion, every young woman and every young man, and by young I mean under 65, 60, should find areas like this that we don't know yet, or we can't figure, whether it's art, poetry, science, whatever, and enjoy this aspect of life too, right? So so let's just summarize it by saying we don't know. Okay, that's what makes it fun. And I don't, when I was a kid in high school, we were going to the moon. So before high school, actually. We were going to high school. We were going to the moon, and there were science fairs, and there was all this stuff for kids to like play around in their garage. And there were chemistry sets, and we eroticized science, and chemistry, biology, zoology. Not so much physics, or computation. We didn't have that yet. But the point was that kids were encouraged to get out in the world and explore stuff. Right. Point one. Mm-hmm. Point two. We are outstripping science fiction here, folks. I mean, most of the science fiction is, it's happenings. So you can't go there. So what I'm saying is, you know what I'm saying. I just hate people not to miss this kind of fun, and in whatever the field. Grown-ups don't know squat. Really, when you look at it from a kid's point of view, the emperor has no clothes. Mm-hmm. That's good. And the point of that story is that it's the kid that points out the truth, the obvious. Like, hey, are you saying information cannot be destroyed? And that the universe moves towards more information? And then what the hell does that mean in terms of the universe expanding and so on and so forth, or dark matter, whatever you want? Okay, so sorry, because I just worry that kids these days are not getting that. Mm-hmm. All right, so thank you for letting me do my diatribe. Anything else before we stop, sir? You want to say something more on this thing?
What's that?
Do you believe that information can be destroyed?
Well, I don't know enough about physics to comment on the theoretical physics perspective.
Or computation, right?
Right. But
well, then that's perfect. I mean, I'm not trying to pressure you to look into this particular thing, but if you don't know and nobody else knows, just think about it. There's a long history of young women and young men doing stuff when they're young because they didn't know any better, that they were stepping outside the bounds of accepted science of the time. And so they come up with a new hypothesis or a new way of looking at things. And I'm saying that everybody should have this. Whether it's shoeing horses or painting cars or, anything.
Weren't you talking about the No-Cloning Theorem last week, and that things can be when that conflict with information can be preserved?
Oh, see, now that's what I mean. That's beautiful. Should I explain the No-Cloning Theorem? Basically, the no-cloning, let's just do it because we're going to have to stop pretty soon. The no-cloning theorem says that you cannot clone anything that has a quantum uncertainty in its fabric, right? And in my opinion, we're going to discover there's quantum tunneling all over the place. Right? The quantum mechanics doesn't just stop at the laboratory. and then get a few plants and a few birds. And by the way, it's been demonstrated in plants and birds that that using the quantum field, let's say crudely, is something that these living creatures do. If that's the case, then you cannot clone life, and I guess that's what my conclusion is. You cannot clone a human except for the material, not the quantum uncertainty. There's quantum uncertainty. Am I saying this right?
Again, I don't know enough.
Okay, look, quantum. So we have take the double slit experiment, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, if we measure it, we're going to get a particle in a particular place, simplicity, okay? Until we measure it, we have a complete wave function of possibilities. Richard Feynman showed that we have to account for I guess he showed, I'm taking the word for it, you have to account for every possible path that the photon could have taken in getting to the wall. And there's going to be a distribution that looks like a wave function of that matches the probability of where the light is where the photon's going to land, right? It's a summation of the amplitudes of this or that. So we don't know it for certainty. We just know that there's these probabilities. We don't know that the cat is dead. We don't know that if the cat's alive, but we know when we open the box, there's only one thing is going to be true. Go into your truth thing. Now, that kind of uncertainty cannot be cloned, because what are you going to clone? The universe in which, or the person who's thinking about the dead cat, or the person who discovered the live cat and took it home to his wife? So that's a no-cloning theorem. You're not going to be able to clone. I mean, you can clone classical things, like yes/no binary of neurons. But the minute they start using quantum effects in the microtubules or wherever they use it, then you can't copy it. So that information in that universe we're getting complicated here, but is inviolate. Are the cats either dead or alive? You can't go back and change that. Correct?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I hope this interests you, because it's a lot of fun to find out, but I don't think you could bring back a cat that's dead. Not in this universe. And it's the only universe we've got. So the no-cloning theorem. Now, the thing that's interesting is that you talked about information being lost or preserved. We still don't know, because when you think about the probability distribution as information, in some universe, that probability is going to be 1, right? It's going to be complete, 100%. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So we still don't know if it's lost or preserved. What about those other probabilities, those potentialities that were never realized? Is that information? Of a sort, but it has to be calculated about the. I wouldn't say it's not information until somebody calculates it. It just didn't happen. I'm not endorsing the multiverse theory, but imagine a world where Napoleon fell off his horse, broke his legs, and changed the politics of Europe forever. That's one world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's another world where Napoleon was successful. You can't have both worlds. Mm-hmm. That's a way of describing with quantum experiments. If you measure it, that's it. You're done. You can't go back and say, "Oh, well, I'm going to change my mind" or something like that. And so, for information, once it's laid down, actually, now this is making me go to the information can't be destroyed camp, because once you lay it down, it's down. That's it. How can you destroy that fact? Let me put it in plain English. Let's just take our universe. once you've laid down, once something happened, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
That information, so something happened, that's information, right? How can you destroy that fact from our universe? I don't think you can, because of the arrow of time.
Right.
This is, people want to know what people are going to do after the AIs come to take everybody's jobs. They're just going to have fun like this. They're going to talk to their AI and say, hey, what was the most popular color for a 74 Chevelle? And draw me a picture. Okay, sir?
Okay.
All right. A lot of fun. Thank you for putting up with it. We'll see you later. Ciao.
Bye.